Welcome to the poem of the day. Woo! Oh my gosh, we got a bunch of people with bad connection. But you know what? I appreciate your presence because the poem of the day today is gonna knock your socks off. It's gonna knock the socks off your fucking brain. Let's go. I don't know what that means. So, if you were here yesterday, then first of all, thank you. And then second of all, you might already know the title of today's poem of the day. That's right, we're gonna be reading Sestina Bob by Jonah Winter. However, I must deliver unto thee two little info downloads before we can actually get to the poem. You know what, Spacer Kip? Correct. We're knocking your tits clean off today. So, first, we gotta learn a little bit about Jonah Winter himself because he seems like a really interesting guy. So, based on his website, he's a little bit of a jokester, and I really like that for him. Love that for him. He, instead of having like an about or anything, he has a tab called Facts, and then next to it, a tab called Myths. So, I looked at them both, and one of them is obviously just facts about himself, and the other is just random things that perhaps have been said about him that aren't true or are completely made up. And even though I know him for this one poem, Sestina Bob, Jonah Winter is actually now primarily a writer of children's books, and he mainly makes picture book biographies that highlight historical figures and centers social justice and artistic expression. So even though his like actual schooling education is in poetry, he's kind of transformed those skills into storytelling for children, which is really cool. He also apparently likes to visit schools to talk to kids about his books. And bonus points for him, he hates the internet, and I respect him for that. This place is such a hellscape from which we cobble together modest joys, if that. So that's that on Mr. Jonah Winter. He seems chill. I fuck with it. Our next order of business is the beautiful serpentine beast known as the Sestina. I'm gonna try to explain it without, wrapping myself up into a tight spiral, but it's difficult. So, kind of Sestina defined. These are the bullet points. Number one, it's a French poetic form consisting of 6 stanzas of 6 lines each, followed by 1 stanza with 3 lines. So total it's 7 stanzas. And if you were curious, a stanza that has 6 lines in it is called a sestet. So it's 6 sestets and 1 3-line envoy, a tercet. The first stanza establishes the line ending words for the entire poem. So stated outright, maybe that's confusing, but I hopefully we'll get to it. So the 6 end words, which have a name, they're called telutons, and I learned this today from none other than who? Terrence Hayes, who we talked about yesterday. He has an article on the poetry website talking about sestinas. So the 6 end words, and I'm saying end words, the telutons, or tilutons, are going to repeat themselves in different patterns in each stanza. So if in stanza number 1, the words just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the 6 words. But in stanza number 2, you're going to go 6, 1, 5, 2, 4, 3. And again, I will pull up a visual aid to hopefully make this make sense. Sestinas are also typically hendecasyllabic, meaning that each line has an even and comforting 11 syllables. And that's pretty much it. Those are the pieces of the sestina. So, it's a funny little piece of math, the way sestinas work. So, I have this, but I don't think you can really see this. It's too long. Oh, hello? Nope. Fuck. Sorry, I have so much shit on this scene that you just can't. Hold on, let me alter this in real time so that you have a no, buddy? Buddy? Is my keyboard not working? There we go. So I'm just going to show you the top 3 stanzas. So hopefully you can see what I mean. Each of these X's is representing just other words in the line. So this is 1 stanza, this is 2 stanzas. This is the end words. The 1 is representing a word, the 2 is representing a word. But this is what I mean when I'm talking about the different words. Oh my God! You reached your 100 stream streak! Holy shit! After poem of the day, we gotta open you a frickin' pack of cards, dude! We gotta card you up, baby! Congratulations and thank you so much. But yes, these are meant to be the words and how they repeat. And there is a set way that you determine how the words are going to repeat, and that is with what Tired Dragon aptly called the Sestina line-ending snail, or the Sestina Tilluton snail. And it looks like, ta-da, this. So you're going to look at this and be like, Catling, what the hell is that? And I'll say, this is your best friend, baby. If you're trying to write a Sestina, this is how you get there. If you go, you write your first stanza, you're being perfectly hendecasyllabic, and you got, okay, I got my 6 ending words, my 6 tillutons. How in the heck do I make the ending word pattern for the next stanza? Well, you go, okay, I gotta do the little spiral. So stanza number 2, we're gonna start, the first line is gonna end with that word number 6. The second line ends with that word number 1, the third with 5, the fourth with 2, the fifth with 4, the sixth with 3. And I know this is probably not helping, but it's okay because I will show you a John Ashbery poem that follows the pattern, and it'll probably make more sense. But this is your best friend, and he is my best friend. And it feels very interesting. I have tried to put together a shorter form of the Sestina, or like a different form of the Sestina, but it doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work, because this involves math, and I didn't delve too deeply into it because what I want to share is the poetry, not necessarily the fucking mathematical part of poetry. That is a very real thing. But apparently the guy who either first started messing around with this form or created this form was really good at playing dice games and doing a lot of mental math in his head. And so you can see how he ended up with a form that requires a math snail to create. So this is it. This is what it is. And also the troubadours are involved with everything, and the troubadours are involved with the Sestina. It's a whole thing. It's an old form. It's got a lot of history, and over time, people have stopped following the form as rigidly. So typically, the envoy, which I guess I didn't represent visually anywhere for you, the envoy, there's a specific order in which you include the words, and each line then includes 2 of the end words, because there's only 3 lines. And usually it's line 1, it's 2 and 5, line 2, it's 4 and 3, and line 3, it's 6 and 1. So that the Sestina kind of connects back over to itself. It makes like a big, I don't know, it consumes itself. It's got Ouroboros energy. But people have started combining those words in different ways in the envoy. People have stopped using the envoy altogether. People are like, hendecasyllabic, fuck that shit. Why would I write a line that's 11 syllables? Form becomes more and less rigid with time. Oh my God, you received my mail. It is I, the purveyor. In any case, all of this said, Sestina math snail shown. Sestina Bob will do nothing to disambiguate this form for you. So while this knowledge marinates in the squiggly confines of your folded, relapsed elastic electric jello, allow me to regale you with a tale of Bob. Afterwards, I could show you a more traditional approach to the mythical Sestina. So, here's Bob. If you're on mobile, this is definitely too small to read, but I figured I'd have it on screen anyway. And buckle up because this is a longer poem. As I said, it's 39 lines. Sestina Bob by Jonah Winter. According to her housemate, she is out with Bob tonight. And when she's out with Bob, you never know when she'll get in. Bob is an English professor. Bob used to be in a motorcycle gang or something, or maybe Bob rides a motorcycle now. How radical of you, Bob. I wish I could ride a motorcycle, Bob, and also talk about Chaucer intelligently. Bob is very tall, bearded, reserved. I saw Bob at a poetry reading last week. He had such a Bob-like poise, so quintessentially Bob. The leather jacket, the granny glasses, the beard, Bob. And you were with my ex-girlfriend, Bob. And you're a professor, and I'm nobody, Bob, nobody. Just a flower deliverer, Bob, and a skinny one at that, Bob. And you are a large person, and I am small, Bob, and I hate my legs, Bob. But why am I talking to you as if you were here, Bob? I'll try to be more objective. Bob is probably a nice guy, or that's what one hears. Bob is not, however, the most passionate person named Bob you'll ever meet. Quiet, polite, succinct, Bob opens doors for people, is reticent in grocery stores. Bob does not talk about himself excessively to girlfriends. Bob does not have a drinking problem. Bob does not worry about his body, even though he's a little heavy. Bob has never been in therapy. Bob also, though, does not have tenure. Ha ha ha! And Bob cannot cook as well as I can. Bob never even heard of paella, and if he had, Bob would not have changed his facial expression at all. Bob is just so boring. And what I can't understand, Bob, yes, I'm talking to you again, is why you, Bob, could be more desirable than me. Granted, Bob, you're more stable, you're older, more mature, maybe, but Bob. Months later, on the Bob front, my former girlfriend finally married Bob. Of Bob, she says, no one has taken me higher or lower than Bob. Me, on a dark and stormy sea of Bob thoughts, desperately I bob. Eh? As one of the people on mobile, are all the end words Bob? Absolutely! All those fancy Tilliotons labeled 1 through 6? Fuck that shit, they're all Bob. And this is what's so interesting about this poem. He specifically employs the form of the Sestina. And he goes, okay, difficult form. You're repeating words, you have to figure out how to fit them in. What if I just subvert the whole goddamn thing and I use one single Bob? Exactly, Spacer Kip. Oops, all Bob. Babe, wake up. New Jolene just dropped. Yep. It is incredible. And I was surprised to see that this poem was first published in frickin' Plowshares, which I can appreciate because it's funny, it's got humor, but it's also rhythmic and well written, and there's something to it. And also, if you'll notice, every single one of the Bob uses is the man's name, except for the last one. The very last one is Bob as a verb and not a name. Because obviously you can try, maybe there's 6 different definitions of Bob that can be utilized in a context-based manner. He didn't even do that. He said, Bob's all the way down. The earth is not supported upon the back of infinite turtles. The earth is supported upon the back of the Bob of Bob, the back of Bob. And it's great. At first, when I first read this poem, I was so mad about it. I hated it, and I recognized that I was being immature and feeling insecure about it. I can now say that I do not feel insecure about it, and I think this poem is great, and it's very tongue-in-cheek. And it's one that I think is definitely meant to be heard, because you can get more of the tone into how you're reading it, as opposed to just straight up reading it. It's not hendecasyllabic, but like I said, most contemporary poets don't bother with that, except for Natalie. Natalie loves a good hendecasyllabic line that's mostly iambic. Woo woo. Uh, and also, I like to do what's called Sestina hard mode, which once I show you the John Ashbery poem, maybe I can make more sense. I'm not going to explain it now, just into the ether. I would show you one of my Sestinas, but a lot of lit magazines are really strict about what counts as an unpublished poem. And if I were to show it on stream and God forbid read it, they might go, actually, you broadcast this poem on April 3rd, 2026, so we're not the first people to show it to the world and we don't want it anymore. It is what it is. I'm not saying that it's wrong to want, first serial rights. I understand that a magazine is a magazine, but also, goddamn, that's strict. Sometimes I just want to read my poems to my internet homies. Okay. So, I'm going to pull up the John Ashbery poem, which, whoops, that's the end of it. Here's the beginning of it. This one's probably a little bit easier to see. It's called The Painter. I realized I didn't pull it up for myself, so... Hello, keyboard? Girly Pop, are you on? Fuck, did it run out of battery? Oh, my keyboard's out of battery. Shit. Fucking shit. I haven't charged it in several days, though, so that makes sense. Hold on. Natalie is floundering. Okay. Good thing I left the old keyboard right here. Are you... Yeah. The paint... That didn't... Oh, is this the one? Yes, okay. So here we have The Painter by John Ashbery. And before I read it out to you, I'm gonna point out what I mean. So the ending words, the telutons of stanza number 1. Buildings, portrait, prayer, subject, brush, canvas. You're going to see every single one of these words in every subsequent stanza at the end of the line. Because you'll see here we got canvas, buildings, brush, portrait, subject, prayer. What do we have next? Prayer, canvas, subject, building, portrait, brush. And in each stanza, they show up in a different order. So no stanza has the same order of the end words, of the tilutons. And the other thing that's interesting is that each stanza is connected by using the same tiluton in the last line and first line. So here we have canvas and canvas right next to each other, and it creates this interesting synergy or repetition. Here we have prayer and prayer, and then next we have brush and brush. It's cool. I gotta say, it's real cool. I keep forgetting you can't see my mouse, but trust me when I say it's there. So let's read The Painter by John Ashbery and see how it sounds different from, obviously, Sestina Bob. Because though it is employing repetition, the repetition is different and more varied. The Painter by John Ashbery. Sitting between the sea and the buildings, he enjoyed painting the sea's portrait. But just as children imagine a prayer is merely science, I'm gonna start over because I don't like that I fucked up like that. Anyway. Okay. The Painter by John Ashbery. Sitting between the sea and the buildings, he enjoyed painting the sea's portrait. But just as children imagine a prayer is merely silence, he expected his subject to rush up the sand and, seizing a brush, plaster its own portrait on the canvas. So there was never any paint on his canvas until the people who lived in the buildings put him to work. Try using the brush as a means to an end. Select for a portrait something less angry and large, and more subject to a painter's moods, or perhaps to a prayer. How could he explain to them his prayer that nature, not art, might usurp the canvas? He chose his wife for a new subject, making her vast, like ruined buildings, as if, forgetting itself, the portrait had expressed itself without a brush. Slightly encouraged, He dipped his brush in the sea, murmuring a heartfelt prayer. My soul, when I paint this next portrait, let it be you who wrecks the canvas. The news spread like wildfire through the buildings. He had gone back to the sea for his subject. Imagine a painter crucified by his subject, too exhausted even to lift his brush. He provoked some artists leaning from the buildings to malicious mirth. We haven't a prayer now of putting ourselves on canvas or getting the sea to sit for a portrait. Others declared it a self-portrait. Finally, all indications of a subject began to fade, leaving the canvas perfectly white. He put down the brush. At once a howl that was also a prayer arose from the overcrowded buildings. They tossed him, the portrait, from the tallest of the buildings, and the sea devoured the canvas and the brush as though his subject had decided to remain a prayer. So here we see a different sort of repetition and more of like the traditional Sestina Tilluton cycle of word usage. You can also see that in the envoy at the end, which it's 3 lines, but that first line didn't fit in the physical print because what I have on the screen is from JSTOR. I don't know why I went to JSTOR. I could have just gone to Poetry Foundation. But he still uses all the words. So in the first line of the envoy, portrait and buildings, and then the second line you have canvas and brush, and the third line you have subject and prayer. And it makes quite a long, self-involved poem. And often I find that I want the poet to rebel a little bit more. I think John Ashbery did a great job with the Sestina. And still, I don't know, I seek an anchor. I don't know. But the Sestina is one of my favorite forms. And actually, I didn't check to see if Ashbery's doing any sort of hendecasyllabic thing. Sitting between the sea and the buildings, he enjoyed painting the sea's portrait, but just as children imagine, a prayer is merely silence. So he's mostly sticking to 10 syllables if he can fit it. Sometimes he goes to 9, sometimes he goes to 12, but that's how it works when you follow a form and then you modify it slightly to fit what exactly you're trying to say. I don't think anyone can write a Sestina Bob again, not with a Sestina anyway. But maybe I'm being small-minded. There is another poem that is in conversation with Sestina Bob by a different poet. What is that one? It's Sestina Like by A.E. Stallings, and he puts at the top with a nod to Jonah Winter. So, Sestina Bob. So if you're interested in something like that again, you should check that out, because A.E. Stallings is also a fun, interesting poet. So just in glancing back at the poetry we've seen so far in these 3 days, where Shelley gave us capital R romantic everything, and Terrence Hayes hit us with the sledgehammer of language and sound directly in the heart. Jonah Winter has gifted us perhaps the most powerful thing of all, and that's a big old fucking smile. Hello. But I do think that humor definitely has a place in poetry, and people sometimes devalue funny poems or poems that have humor and mirth and joy as their center. Because as a society, we have this mental image of the sad poet, the depressed artist that simply cannot make their way through the world. And that's not healthy, and I don't think it's true. There is no requirement for pain. Great art does not require suffering to be at its core. Sorry, I'm staring at you because I'm making a point. And sometimes it can be difficult to leave that idea behind because many of us are pushed towards the creation of art when we are enduring great suffering. But just because it was the incentive to begin doesn't mean it needs to continue being the fuel. Precisely, Spacer Kip. Do not other emotions deserve expression? They do. They absolutely do. And with that, we conclude today's poem of the day.